So with this, I would like to introduce our first keynote, which doesn't need an introduction, Rich Ling. Rich was the Shaw Foundation Chair of Media Technology at Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, until retiring in 2021. With a PhD in sociology from the University of Colorado Boulder, so right here, we're back in Rich's arena. He started his career at Telenor, the Norwegian telecommunications operator. Rich also spent time at the IT University of Copenhagen mobile communication group, where I had the opportunity to work with him for a year. For more than 3 decades, Rich has studied the social consequences of mobile communication. He has studied its use on micro-coordination, emergencies, its adoption by teens, and its use by women and small-scale entrepreneurs in places such as Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, and Myanmar. His focus had been on how mobile telephony illuminates fundamental social forces such as strong tie bonds and triadic interaction. Ling has written or edited 11 books and over 100 peer-reviewed papers and book chapters. These include books that you're mostly familiar with: The Mobile Connection, New Tech, New Ties, and Taken for Grantness. He also edited the Journal of Computer-Mediated Communication and is one of the founding editors of Mobile Media and Communication. And in addition, he's founded and co-edited the Oxford University Press Serious Studies in Mobile Communication, and is the former head of the ICA Mobile Communication Interest Group. He's an ICA Fellow, a member of that I don't think I can pronounce that. Yes, the Norwegian Academy of Science and Arts, and Academia Europaea. With that, let's welcome Rich. Let me
Just to let you know how mobile the world is, I just got a message that my daughter's cat has its GPS tracker on in Oslo. So if he goes to the wrong places, I'll get another message. Hello, thank you very much for coming. For me, this is really exciting to come to Colorado. I'm a native Coloradan, a fourth generation Coloradan, so it's nice to be able to come back. I don't know if this is a good title, but it's the title that we had, and I had to sort of go with it. But this talk, don't expect a linear narration about something, because there's a lot of back and forth in time, there's a lot of different twists and turns, and hopefully it'll turn into something that, hopefully it'll be okay at the end. Let me see. There. Okay, there's 3 different parts. I'm going to take a look back and look a little bit at the same things that Adriana was looking at in the video. I'm going to give a bit of advice and reflections in an old-fashioned academic career. I did more and more of that as I went up the scale at Nanyang, and I think that there may be something that I can contribute there. And then taking a look forward, and I think this is going to be perhaps one of the most difficult parts, or one of the most trying things. So taking a look back, a short tour around Colorado and the technical foundation of mobile communication. Not all of this is going to be in Colorado, but it's where it's going to start. So here I am in my full cowboy gear. Notice how low the holster is, so you can pull the gun out as quickly as possible. This is north of here, about 30 miles, where I grew up. But the next, the thing is going up to Boulder. We noticed the University of Colorado's mentioned. Every photo of campus always has to look to the southwest, because they have to get the Flatirons in the background. So that's the classic photograph. But I also want to just focus in on a particular person, because tying this into some of the theoretical work that I've been doing, a fellow by the name of Kenneth Boulding. He's an economist, but a really bizarre economist. He was head of the American Economics Association, the AAAS, a lot of different, came from Manchester. He had a horrible stutter, but he was one of those people, and if you can find 2 or 3 of them in your career, who just inspire you. He just had a way of saying things and developing things that really pushed me and made me really want to study. And also the ecological approach. People have talked about how I sort of have the idea of niches and the technologies move into niches. That came from him. So that's one of the first sort of touch points for my economic journey. The next one is really a little bit of a bizarre one, and we're going to have to go back quite a few years, 1946. And this is way out in a little town called Cheyenne Wells, way out east on the prairie. You can't even see the mountains. You're closer to Kansas than you are by far to Denver. But Cheyenne Wells, it turns out, is the first place that they use radio in what they call the local loop. That is the last bit of connection between the telephone and the exchanges. Cheyenne Wells, 1946. And the point is that they had these farms, these ranches way out in the prairie there, that you just can't put a copper cable all the way out to them. So they had the idea of using radio to give these people, it's not mobile communication, but it's radio-based communication. And so this is one of the first times, 1946. And interestingly, one of the reasons, here's the guys sort of setting up the stuff out in the thing there. But interestingly, yeah, I'm going to have to do that. This is my grandfather. So he was one, the reason I had that newspaper article was that it was in his papers. And I showed that to some of the historians, the technical historians of mobile communication. And they said, well, this is probably one of the first times that they were using radio in the local loop. So this is 1946. Now, 1947, at Bell Labs, particularly Douglas Ring, but his colleague Ray Young, developed the cellular concept. If you have just one antenna, you have to use the same frequency, so it's very inefficient. But if you have cells that you go from, that's a far more efficient use of the radio frequencies. And so 1946 was the radio in the local loop, 1947 was cellular telephony. But also, I noted down in the corner there, 1947 is also the year the transistor came. So in 1947, they didn't have the computing power to do the cellular thing. And the transistor was just coming at that point. Okay, so there's a little bit of the history. We go a little bit further, 1969, and the first cellular system trial, 1969, on the Metroliner between Washington and New York. Here they were using that cellular concept of handoff and frequency sharing. So, unfortunately, one of the first people to use it was Richard Nixon, who was going from Washington to New York. Okay, I'm going to be political today, and I may get thrown out of the country, but okay, fine. I've got a place to go. My next step, and this is one of the most bizarre collections of the bizarre document that I've ever come across in my work, and it's a little bit difficult for me to read, but it's Sammandrag av medieundersökelser för Televerket, a collection of the media research done for the Televerk in Norway between 1966 and 1981. And it's just one-page resumes of all the markets research that they were doing in that period. Should they continue with the telegraph? Should they have digitalization? Should they electronic post? Should they there were all kinds of really bizarre things. But in 1975, to the right here, there's one study. Now this is 1975. About 6 or 8 years after the Metroliner thing. They're starting to think, how are we going to use mobile communication? This is utveckling och utbygging of mobiltjenester i Norge, the development and building of the mobile service in Norway in 1975. And the thing that they did is they sent a letter to all 1,350 people who had a mobile phone in Norway. All of them. That was the total population of people, and they asked them, why did you get it? They were trying to figure out how are they going to develop this service. This is still a state-run organization, and most of them said they got it because of work. That 83% got it of work, mostly because of work, and the director guy sees this cool new thing and he gets the company to buy it, and at this point they put it in his car. And sometimes when they use it, he would hold the thing down to send, and the lights of the car would dim because they were they used so much power. But some of them were using it for leisure time and so on. But here's about 6 or 8 years. This isn't really social science. This is more markets type of research. But still, we're following that development. And now the last on this technical side is in the early 90s, SMS came. And this is another one of my personal touch points. The guy on the right-hand side there, Finn Throsby, is one of my colleagues. And it's always fascinating. I met him just a couple of weeks ago. He's a fascinating fellow. And just talking to him about why they just, texting, that didn't exist. And there's this niche of, should we send a text instead of real-time communication? And they were really worried about it, and why 160 characters, and all of that kind of thing going on. It's just fascinating to talk with him. Now I'm going to go over to our field, social science, yay. Studying mobile communication, the social consequences of mobile communication. And Pete, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the earliest paper that I've found is by Jarrett and Coates from 1990. The future use of cellular technology, some implications, and they talk about making things go faster, finding parking spaces. They actually, it's a pretty fanciful article, and this is the earliest one that I think I've ever found. Next one is Lana Raquel in Villa Navarro. I don't know how to say her first name. From 1993, remote mothering. It's fascinating. At an early paper, takes up the issue of how mobile communication is going to make the world worse for women, which is basically the theme of that paper. And Klaus Lange also in 1993 had another paper. So now we're coming over into the world of social science after sort of a long technical thing. Now a little bit more into the people, our group. I don't think any of the, Leopoldina, for example, isn't here, but COS 248. In the late 1990s, Leslie Haddon, Leopoldina was there, Ina Maltemeyer, a whole collection of people. This was an EU project in the early 1990s that included both the internet, but also mobile communication. And the book, The Communication on the Move, as far as I understand, it's one of the earliest books that deals with this. It was a collection of papers that came out of the COS 248. And then, as Leopoldina mentioned, the Rutgers, and there was the Grimstad seminar, and there was a collection of other seminars, and also Xin's conference in Chingchun in 2002. Then we're starting to build this community. But it was a period of edited collections. And that was, that was good. We're getting our papers out. We're having venues to publish. But that was a little bit of a dead end. There were books, Perpetual Contact's already been mentioned by Cambridge University Press, which took it up, and that's a big deal. But still, it's an edited book. It's not peer-reviewed articles. And also on the right-hand side is the proceedings from the Chingchun ICA, the first ICA conference. Publication of single-authored books. Timo Kopama on the left in 2000, which was a very early, a Finnish fellow, and Mobile Connection came out 4 years later. But I think for me, one of the really big deals, and I'm sorry, you can all tell him that I mentioned him when he gets here, Scott's papers, he was quite early. And I see the title here, the Koschel construction of mobile telephony. And I don't know really what that is, but maybe it's just a typo. But this is from 2003. So now we're moving over into the peer-reviewed world. Okay, going from these specialized, very specialized conferences where a bunch of people that are just kind of fiddling around, and not fiddling around, but just sort of like in the wilderness, moving into more and more and more institutionalized situations. And I think Scott really deserves a pat on the back for helping us take it out of that sort of a small scale or what's parochial type of situation and putting it out for the broader academic community. Then, of course, Veronica is the big motor for mobile media and communication, along with Thilo. With Thilo and so I have to get both of them. And then also ICA, the mobile comm. And this conference has a legacy of being kind of a place for the people to meet. And every time I come, I sort of look out at the crowd. How many people do I know and how many don't I know? And if I know too many, that's a bad thing. And if I don't know very many, that's a bad thing. But there's kind of a nice mix here. So good job, you guys. That's kind of the thing. Also, I have to mention Christoph Nieri's series in Hungary that had some of the same function. Okay, so now I've kind of followed that development in the social sciences from a little bit of a niche, a little bit of a to the side, more and more central. We have our own journal. We have, and ICA Mobile has become a division. All of that stuff is going on. But what are the areas? What are we doing? In the beginning, it's easy because you just go out and notice people doing odd things. And you can just sort of figure out that people are doing different stuff. But now, what are the different threads within this community? And these are the types of things that we've been focusing on. Habits and compulsive behavior. Joe's Mr. Habit. Identity formation. International development in the global south, which is really a big thing that we need to understand a lot more of. Changes in social interaction, phubbing, which also gets back up into the compulsive behavior. Forging and maintaining social ties, micro-coordination. Commercial and business uses are something that you see a lot of that in the business journals. Teens and family dynamics. Various forms of network analysis, which tips over in a different direction. It's a lot more technical, a lot more mathematical. The role of platforms in everyday life. What does Uber do? What does Tinder do? What do those platforms do? Privacy and surveillance. And here's something, if I were young today, AI and mobile communication. That's something we don't have any idea what's going to happen with that. And so is that going to be, what's going to happen there? So with that, with those ideas, with those threads, I want to make a pivot now, and I'm going to give advice to the young scholars, and I'm going to give some advice to the older scholars in the room, okay? And some reflections. And now I have to preface this that this is old-fashioned because things are changing quite dynamically. But my phrase, I remember I was at a thing in Nanyang, and somebody said, what advice would you give to a young scholar? This is one of those things where the people who decide on tenure were having a meeting with the people who were just hired. And so, what do you have to do? And my advice to them, when they say your name, they should think of X. They should think of your field. They have to have a hook to hang you on. They have to say, oh, that's the person that does that. There has to be a complete short sentence that is you. And then, that's very difficult to do. You have to, it's establishing an academic profile. Most often it's one thing. A lot of times people, I want to do this, and I'm going to continue my studies in that, and I'm going to do that. Okay, no, one thing. But that's just me being old-fashioned. Remember that, okay? By the way, that movie, Tenure, it actually exists. I haven't been able to see it, but it's kind of, I want to at some point. So what is your X? That's the thing. And it's a very difficult thing to do. It's a really big thing. It has tightly enough defined so that the tenure committee can grasp it. And remember, the tenure committee is not always social scientists. They're not always in your field. They don't understand, obscure sociological concepts of Talcott Parsons and enunciation or something, whatever thing. They have to have a very concrete idea of what you do in their terms. And so that's a very difficult thing to do. At the same time, it has to be loose enough so that it gives you space to grow. And just find a theme, as I said, that jazzes you, not too idiosyncratic. I've seen people that, well, I'm focusing on the way people in my hometown have developed something or other. And that's the truth. That's too weird. That's too specific. That's too you. You've got too much skin in that game. You don't have distance. It's too, perhaps make it a big question. There might be an existing community of scholars / mentors that helps you, but you need your niche. You need that critical distance. I'm just have this picture here of the fellow from Myanmar showing his feature phone. And for me, that was one of the cool things about moving into the developing world, to see those kinds of things going on. He was actually a local king, sort of a mafioso kingpin. But I heard a talk not too long ago by Karen Wall-Jorgensen in journalism. And this is where I really appreciated the way she put together her career. This is in journalism, not mobile comm. She focuses on deliberation in journalism. But her focus has allowed her different methods, different approaches, different theories. It allowed her to roll with the changes as they came along and incorporate them into her focus. The focus, your focus will change, will be different based on your location, and different schools have different needs and levels of ambition. I think you get a pretty sort of clean version of it, or a distilled version at NTU. They're very, very strong on this. Other schools would be a little bit looser on this. So that, I'm sort of channeling that bit. But there's that thing going on. So when they say your name, you have to do the studies, write the papers, and bold, underline. That's the thing. Network with other scholars, participate in the forums, make the contacts. These are your tenure letter writers, and do your teaching and service. Okay, but those papers, that's very, very central. Now, I'm going to go to the other end of the career. Well, not my end, but a little bit closer to me. When you get tenure, to get tenure, after you've gotten tenure, the game flips. Because then the game flips when you're tenured. When they say X, they should think of you. In other words, when they say that discipline, that sub-discipline, they should think of your name. In other words, it's not your name and they think of X. It's they think, oh, that's the person that does that. That's the when they say, no, I'm sorry, I'm getting this mixed up. When they say that sub-discipline, they should think of you. And that's a completely different game. For pre-tenure, it's kind of an ego thing. Make your name, establish your brand. Post-tenure, it's institution building. You're paying back. You're building and supporting others. You're doing the mentoring, those kinds of things. I had fun finding that photograph, the sort of the old professor under the stone thing. But develop your discipline and your institution. I've been on tenure committees where the person says, I don't do committees at my university because I'm so concerned about my own institution, my sub-discipline. I'm a journal editor or something or other. Bullshit. But do the background stuff. And this is the boring stuff. You don't get, you're not in the photographs. You don't get your name listed. You do, but it's, the peer reviews. And for every article you print, 2 to 3 peer reviews is kind of the rule. And we need to really, come on, people. I've had to search around for peer reviewers, and that is it's tougher and tougher. Stop that. But for the people going up for full professor, edit the journals, sit on the committees, organize the symposium, co-author the papers with junior faculty and grad students, and push them to be the first author. You don't need that anymore. You don't need first authorship. You've got it. Don't exploit others. Avoid, and now this is something I'm more and more concerned with. Avoid honorary authorship. I'm seeing dossiers where people are publishing in 2 years, they've got 30 papers. Come on, that's not right. If I walk up to you and I say, I like that paper that you wrote on X, would you tell me about your methods? It's some grad student or some junior faculty member that's done the work and put them as a co-author. Stop that. You've made your mark, you don't need the citations, okay? Now, this is, now, like I say, this is going all over the place. Please ignore everything I've just said. We're at a Judd Pearson moment. Nobody knows Judd Pearson except me, I think. You weren't in social, you were in comm, so you didn't meet Judd. Judd Pearson, I think he was an okay scholar. I think he was a good guy. I think in his day he knew statistics, but by the time I'd gotten to him, he'd had a stroke. He didn't remember the formulas. We were doing statistics by hand. We had to, do a standard deviation by hand. He had a cigarette and he'd sort of walk around and, write the wrong equation on the board. This was when SPS was coming in. Okay? So we were learning a technology that probably all of you at some point have had to do, a statistical thing by hand, but that's not the technology that's there. Judd was the wrong person at the wrong time, and probably the last semester or two of his career. But new political challenges are afoot. Like Judd, I'm an old fart telling younger people about their careers in a very changed landscape. My experience doesn't apply necessarily. Things are changing now very, very quickly. I'm going to use another example of just sort of the peril of the moment. Fax machines in 1988 and the UK postal worker strike. The postal workers in the UK went out on strike in 1988 for about 2 weeks. It was over, some pay bonuses thing. At this exact moment, fax machines, the price of fax machines was coming down. They'd been standardized so that you could talk with all the other fax machines. And so suddenly there's a strike. It's not that expensive to buy a fax machine. You can run out and get one and continue doing your business if you had to transfer documents like people had to do at that point. So it allowed business people to transact business and to do their normal life. 5 more minutes, okay? Do you have a question, or is it 5 more minutes? Okay. So the thing is, here's a new technology coming in, a crisis moment, and that meant that the postal system changed. So the big picture, an old line, perhaps creaky institution was saddled with short-term crisis, provided an opening for new technology. And here comes the sociologist. It's an institutional trajectory inflection event is the word. This is the sociologist speaking for the postal system, and I say neologism needed. So I put that into ChatGPT, and I came out with instaflection as a neologism for this. I don't think that works very well. But the universities, right, my point is, US universities, particularly US universities, but also global universities, are in a similar situation. A relatively short-term crisis with the new political administration, and a new technology that is coming in, AI. So that technology is coming in, there's a crisis going on, and how are we going to get out of this? AI is evolving in research and academia. Everybody has their thing. I've got this jumpy castle thing, or this air thing, because it's an experiment that showed that AI is finding not just new calculations for prediction, it's discovering new variables, which goes even more basic. But we're in the very beginning of how to deal with that. I note at the bottom that journals and peer reviewers need to develop standards and practice for dealing with this. And the old guard, like me, are probably going to react negatively. So the younger people in this room, this is your future. You're going to have to do this for us. That's your job, not mine. Ha ha ha. So frame-wide insta-deflection questions. The political movements aimed at challenging the position of the university. There's the events at Harvard and Columbia. J.D. Vance has said the universities are the enemy, the professors are the enemy. So that's the crisis that's going on. So we've got AI and we've got a relatively short-term crisis. When we pick the pieces up after Humpty Dumpty falls off the wall, it's not going to be put together the same way. We're not going to go back to the world that I knew or that Judd Pearson knew. You guys are going to have to create a new world that's going to have to deal with this. By the way, the picture there was generated by ChatGPT with Trump using AI to push Humpty Dumpty off the wall. But we have to be, okay, for us trained in the previous regime, like I was talking about earlier, we have to be nimble. We have to foster the maintenance of the university as a part of the Enlightenment project. We have to be open for a changed position of academia. For people who are coming in, you also have to be very nimble. This is a chance, but there's an opportunity, there's a chance here for you. It's an era of danger, but also potential. And you're going to have to develop the guiding principles and think about the goal. Why are we doing this? Why do we have a university? And for that, I went back to Thomas Jefferson and also David Brooks. Thomas Jefferson wrote, I think by far the most important bill in our whole code is that for the diffusion of knowledge among the people, no other sure foundation can be devised for the preservation of freedom and happiness. Enlightenment of the people, teaching the people, doing the research, doing that work is the job of democracy. David Brooks put it a different way. A kid comes on campus, inquisitive but uninformed. By senior year, there's something impressive about her. She has awakened a cultured, critical thinker. The universities have performed their magic once again. I think we have to step back at this moment and think about that broader picture, where we're going. And I don't have to do that. You guys do. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. My name is Moira Montasi, and I have the following question. You're talking about AI as a sort of moment that leads us to think about the future and as something unavoidable to think about. I feel like as a person working in mobile com right now, I need to think about AI somehow, somewhere. Did you feel the same at the time when mobile communication was emerging? I mean, was mobile com for you and your generation the same that might be AI for ours?
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I totally agree. And maybe this is the sociologist in me, but it's a huge opportunity to just go out and see, how do people make sense of that? What are they doing with it? How is it okay? Is it scary? Is it potential? Is it good, bad? And then just find out how that fits into their value schemes and so on. That's the sociologist in me. The psychologist, they're going to have another set of questions. They've got another toolbox. The linguist, I had the fortune of working together with Naomi Barron, and that's it's wonderful to go to another discipline and find out they've got this great set of tools that you haven't even thought about, but it illuminates different issues. It shines the light on the issue from a slightly different perspective. And so I think if I go to AI, it's a little bit less tangible than a mobile, people walking around with a mobile phone and the way they use it, and people don't always understand when they're using it actually. They start writing something, they get a suggestion or on how to write the text. But getting people to think about, what does that mean? How does that change things? How does it change their position in society? What are the critical, what are the benefits? What does it help? What does it hurt? Those kinds of broad questions you can apply, and it's a super exciting time in that respect. So good luck with it.
Thank you.
Hi, Rich. Thank you so much. This was so helpful. I want to have you dig into the fact that you're a sociologist and you understand institutions, And I also really appreciate how you bring history to bear. And I'm getting more and more to where I feel old because I get frustrated that people are like, this is brand new, it's never happened before. I'm like, yes, it has. I like your Humpty Dumpty picking up the pieces thought a lot. What have we seen in history that you would say might guide us toward a way of thinking about the pieces are all falling apart? How do we start planning now for putting Humpty Dumpty back together again?
Yeah. Well, I think if I go back, not too far back, but poor Judd Pearson, he was saying, these kids, they don't understand how to do a standard deviation by hand.
Right.
Because this SPS thing, they just put a bunch of numbers and the number pops out, and they don't have any idea what that is. I think that would have been his position. But then I go back, Jeff and I have a common in Barry Wellman, in both for good and bad. And he wrote an article, somebody asked him one time, what's the most important book in sociology? And he said the SPSS manual. The SPSS manual. But think about it. It changed the very questions that we ask. In order to do social science, well, not just SPSS, but statistical computing, it changed, to gather that data, to shuffle it into a form that SPSS could deal with, that changed the types of questions, it changed the forms of analysis, it changed the theorizing in a way that almost nothing else has done in the last generation or so. So, there's an example of us being confronted, Judd Pearson, that's total crisis. But if the folks that were nimble enough on their feet to understand, wow, well, okay, I don't really need to calculate all these standard deviations by hand. I just put all the numbers and I find that, but I can also use that in path analyses or in structural equation model and da. And so it's given us that path. That's, and that's a huge, when I was editing JCMC, those were the articles that we got all the time. The thing that it doesn't do is the qualitative articles, the qualitative work. It really puts an emphasis on, okay, to do science, you do this questionnaire, gather this data somehow, put it in the machine, shake it around, and get an answer. The qualitative side sort of got put into the shadows because of that. At the time of Judd Pearson, ethnomethodology was Goffman, all that qualitative stuff was going on, and that's to a certain degree been put in the shadows a little bit. So there's an example, a relatively recent one.
Hi, I'm Arturo. Nice to meet you. Thank you for the presentation. It was a very good overview, historical overview of technology, which I did not necessarily witness. I was thinking about what the Humpty Dumpty, and I was thinking about in a period where everything is falling apart, and we witness the crisis of neoliberalism to some extent. So I believe that the question should go to, do we need to build another Humpty Dumpty with the same pieces, or maybe we should build another one?
Yeah.
And most importantly, considering the crisis of the different technological circles and loops that innovation brings, maybe we should not follow necessarily technology, research in technology, but we should find a common path towards we should go as researchers, saying we would like this type of society, or we would like society, or provide different, ideas of where society should go, and then focus on moving the research field to that direction. So be less dependent on technology, on technological innovation, because we don't have it in our hands, so we don't have no control over it, because companies have built the business model that they run and that they develop to make a profit out of it. And therefore researchers were like, okay, we need to figure it out if it's actually good or bad for people, but we are not creating necessarily for the people, we are creating for the business model. So, I don't know, I think, also I like the overview of what young researchers should do, because that's actually the crisis of academia right now. We got on this path of continuous anxiety that we need to reach certain goals, we need to make tenure to somehow to continue to survive. And at the end, the true role of researcher, which is for me correct societal change, doesn't come out.
Okay.
and we have nothing, we have no room to think about it.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe it's a bit too much.
I understand. I think one of your questions is, one of your points is that, okay, maybe we shouldn't focus on technology, or, we should continue with it. I think that is one of my big pictures. I think for me, sort of the ground idea here is preservation of a democratic society and the role of the university in that. That's, and that the work of the Enlightenment. In terms of technology, I fear that the genie is out of the bottle. I fear that the technology is out there, AI is out there, and it's going to change things. You can learn calculus on YouTube. You can learn very advanced sorts of things, but that doesn't necessarily bring you to the critical questions that you bring up. And so how do you do that? How do you legislate that? You protest your way to that? I don't know. But I think that those are the types of questions that we're going to need to be asking. And so please keep doing. And I have this fantasy. In 25 years, you are going to be standing up here, and you're going to be the old fart. And you're going to be telling people, oh, back when AI first came in.
All right, we have a last question here, and then it's time for the break.
Hi, Rich. I'm Devjani. So my question is regarding an aspect that we discussed about, how AI can help young researchers to do research and the boundaries of language, because English is not my first language. And in fact, it's my fourth language. So what happens is, I tend to think in different languages and then translate it. What I wanted to know, what are your boundaries, or what do you think is the ideal AI use, and to what extent can we stretch it? Because and that's what I want.
Yeah, but does this go back to the question of getting articles into journals and stuff like that? Yeah, because I think that's an issue that really needs, and for people exactly in your situation. I know I've worked a long time with Leopoldina Fortunati, and she's just this most wonderful person. If for those of you who haven't met her, she's just this force of life. She writes really crappy English, and I've edited her and had to work with, and now she's using AI to help her clean up her English, which is fantastic. I think that just like Judd Pearson insisting everybody would do things by and sort of beat their head against the wall for something that's not really going someplace. That's okay. We don't need to do that. But the journal articles, the editors, and all of that aren't there yet. And where is that boundary? If you send something in that's 10% changed by AI, or 40% changed, or 60%, where does that boundary go? Or how do we even know? And so I don't have an answer. I really don't know what the answer to that question is, but your generation is going to have to figure that one out. This is so wonderful. This is, I'm just sort of throwing everything over onto you guys. I can just sort of throw out stuff and you guys have to deal with it.
All right, Rich, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you.